My daughter Nadia was the reason I got up before the sun did. In a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Tulsa where the radiator knocked twice before it caught. Every morning I made her the same thing. 2 eggs, toast cut on the diagonal because she said triangles tasted better than squares. I packed her backpack the night before so mornings wouldn't feel like a scramble. Small things. But small things were what I had left to give her. 5 years earlier I'd been a structural engineer with a firm downtown, the kind of job where you wear a badge and people ask your opinion in meetings. Then my wife Selena died in a car accident on Highway 75. And grief did something to my attention that no amount of trying could fix. I missed deadlines. I missed a site inspection I should never have missed. The firm let me go quietly, the way people let you go when they still feel bad about it. After that I took what came. Appliance repair. Odd jobs through a guy named Fintan O'Malley who ran a shop 2 blocks from my apartment and never once made me feel small for asking. I kept a green ledger of every job I did, every part one bought, every hour I billed because that habit didn't die with the career. My father had been a contractor, and he used to say a job wasn't finished until it was written down. He left me one thing when he passed. A brass spirit level scratched along one edge, the bubble a little slow to settle now. I kept it in the truck. I never used it for work anymore. I kept it because it was his. That Tuesday, I just finished a repair job near the business district and stopped into a cafe for something warm before picking up Nadia from Briar Langston's 3rd grade classroom. I sat down at a table an employee had waved me toward. I didn't know yet that the reservation had my name on it by mistake, or that a woman named Morgan Ashford was about to walk through that door already furious about something that had nothing to do with me. I found that out the hard way. What happened next took 30 seconds and cost me something I didn't get back for a long time. Morgan Ashford came in like weather. I'd learn later she'd spent the morning fighting off a hostile takeover attempt from a board member named Theron Blackwood, and that her assistant had double-booked the table I was sitting at. I didn't know any of that then. I just knew a woman in a charcoal suit was standing over me telling me I'd taken something that belonged to her. I told her the host had seated me there. She wasn't listening. Her voice climbed and mine didn't, because raising it had never gotten me anywhere in my whole life. Then she slapped me. The cafe went quiet enough that I could hear the espresso machine hiss behind the counter. I didn't say anything. I looked down at the table. Not because of the sting, but because for 1 second I was 17 again, standing in a foreman's trailer being told I didn't belong on a job site I'd tested into. Her head of security, a broad, quiet man named Magnus Steele, stepped up beside her the way security does. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at my wrist where my sleeve had ridden up during the commotion. There's a scar there, pale and long, from a night 5 years ago I don't talk about much. Magnus went still. I need you to roll up your sleeve, he said. Not a threat. Something else in his voice. I did. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at Morgan. Ma'am, he said. I think you need to sit down. I didn't understand what was happening. I picked up my coat and left before I could find out. I had a daughter waiting on me at 3:15, and Briar Langston didn't appreciate late pickups. I drove home with the radio off. I don't remember most of that drive. I remember the brass level rattling against the toolbox in the back seat. The same rattle it always made, like nothing in the world had changed. I was wrong about that. Something had. I told myself I'd never think about that cafe again. For almost 3 weeks I nearly believed it. Then Morgan Ashford found my address. I want to be fair to her, because that's the only way this story means anything. She didn't show up demanding anything. She knocked on my door on a Saturday morning holding a paper bag from the bakery on Cherry Street, and she looked like a woman who hadn't slept right in a while. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not the kind my lawyer would write. I let her in. Nadia was at the kitchen table drawing, and Morgan crouched down to her level and asked what she was making, and Nadia showed her, and Morgan looked at that drawing longer than politeness required. Over the next month, things got easier than I expected them to. Morgan didn't throw money at the situation the way I half expected a woman like her to. She asked questions instead. What had I studied? What I used to build before everything changed? She sat at my kitchen table on a Thursday evening and looked at an old structural drawing I still had rolled up in a closet, a pedestrian bridge design I'd never gotten to finish, and she didn't say anything for almost a full minute. "This is good work, Hector," she said. "This is really good work." I hadn't heard anyone say that to me in 5 years. I let my guard down. I let myself believe that the woman who'd slapped me in a cafe was capable of seeing past it, that maybe good people do bad things under enough pressure and the measure of them is what they do after. She offered me a contract position at Ashford Dynamics, on a team developing affordable structural retrofits for aging apartment buildings. I said yes before I'd finished thinking it through. You know that feeling when you've been careful for so long that letting your guard down feels like relief instead of risk? I felt that. For the first time since Selena died, I felt like something might actually be getting better. I should have kept being careful. The next conversation changed everything. But not the way you think. The first month at Ashford Dynamics went well enough that I started believing in it completely. Then Celestine Marsh, the HR director, called me into her office on a Wednesday morning and closed the door in a way that told me before she said a word. "Hector," she said, "I need to ask you about your file." I didn't have a file that should have raised questions. I'd been careful my whole life about paperwork, the way my father taught me. But Celestine slid a folder across her desk, and inside it were background check results with my name at the top and details that weren't mine. A different social security number. An address in Amarillo I'd never lived at. A prior termination for cause I'd never had. I sat there looking at it, and I understood something had been built to make me look unstable, unreliable. Not worth the risk Morgan had taken on me. I found out later, though not that day, that it traced back to a man named Theron Blackwood, the board member fighting Morgan for control of the company. He'd hired a private investigator named Revenant Sloan to manufacture a paper trail he could use against her decision-making, and I was the easiest target, since I had no lawyer and no leverage and a slap heard by half a cafe already on record somewhere in the city's rumor mill. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Celestine said. "But I have to put you on administrative leave until this is resolved." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my green ledger from my desk on the way out, the one where I write down every hour, every job, every date, because if there was one thing I could control it was my own record of the truth. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the ledger open in front of me and my father's brass level next to it, and I went through every entry from the last 5 years, every date I could account for, building my own case before anyone asked me to. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just started writing everything down, the way I'd always been taught to, because paranoia is delayed awareness. And I was done being late to the things that mattered. I need to tell you about the legal consultation before I tell you what happened at the boardroom because without it, none of what came next makes sense. My sister Valencia Reyes has a friend who does contract law, and she sat with me at her kitchen table 2 nights after I was put on leave, going through my ledger page by page. Her name was Grace Whitfield, and she had a quiet office and a way of listening that didn't perform sympathy. "This is the most organized evidence I've ever seen from someone who isn't a lawyer," she told me, tapping the ledger. "Every date here can be verified against actual work orders. That fabricated file falls apart the second someone checks it against your real employment history." She explained it plainly. The manufactured background check had errors that pointed to whoever built it in a hurry, sloppy enough that a forensic review would expose it fast. She used words like could and may. Never promised me anything certain, but she gave me a path. I thought about Morgan the whole drive home. I thought about whether she'd known, whether she'd been part of it, whether the kindness at my kitchen table had been real or just good timing for someone building a narrative. I decided I needed to find out before I decided anything else. So I called Magnus Steele. Not to accuse. Just to ask what he'd seen that day in the cafe, the day he'd looked at my scar like it meant something. He told me something I didn't expect. 5 years ago, before he worked for Morgan, Magnus had been at a charity gala when a fire broke out. A man had gone back inside for 2 people trapped near the kitchen exit, gotten them out, and vanished before anyone could get his name. Magnus had never forgotten the scar on that man's wrist. "That was you," he said. "I've known since the cafe. I told her the same day. That was Osric Bellamy's fire. I hadn't thought about that night in years, not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd never wanted credit for it. My wife had been gone 8 months at that point, and running into a burning building had felt less like courage and more like not caring very much what happened to me. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I called Grace back and told her I was ready to move. This is where things started to move faster than I expected. The board meeting was on a Thursday, and Grace Whitfield came with me, though she told me clearly beforehand that she was there to advise, not to speak for me. Morgan hadn't known about the fabricated file. I want to say that plainly because when Celestine Marsh presented the forensic review to the board, showing the background check had been altered using data purchased through a shell research firm traced back to Revenant Sloan, Morgan's face didn't perform shock. It was already there, underneath, like she'd been waiting to be wrong about something and hoping she wasn't. Theron Blackwood sat very still. This company hired an investigator to manufacture false records against a contractor, Desdemona Whitlock said from across the table, reading the forensic summary twice like she wanted to be sure she wasn't misreading it. To what end exactly? To discredit a decision I disagreed with, Theron said, and even he didn't sound like he believed it was worth what it had cost. I didn't say much. I told Grace beforehand I didn't want to make a speech, and I didn't. I set my ledger on the table when Celestine asked for it, open to the pages that matched every real date against every real job. Every hour is documented, I said. My father taught me to write things down. He used to say a job wasn't finished until it was on paper. I didn't think I'd ever need it for something like this. Theron resigned from the board within the week, not because anyone forced him to publicly, but because the version of events that would have come out in a formal hearing was worse for him than quietly stepping down. Desdemona made sure of that. Revenant Sloan lost his license over it, which felt less like triumph and more like something that simply had to happen. I took my brass level out of the truck that evening just to hold it. The bubble still ran slow. I didn't need it to be fast. I just needed it to still be mine. Morgan called that night. I should have asked more questions before I brought you in, she said. I built a company on moving fast and I let it cost you something real. I didn't gloat. There wasn't anything in me that wanted to. I just told her the truth, which was that I still didn't know what came next for either of us. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to find out. It took about 4 months for things to settle into whatever the new normal was going to be. Ashford Dynamics reinstated me with back pay before I even asked for it, and the retrofit project I'd been working on became something bigger than either of us expected. Morgan didn't try to make up for what happened with money. She made up for it by actually using my design work, by putting my name on the drawings instead of burying it under a company logo. Nadia asked me once why I still carried the brass level around even though I didn't use it for jobs anymore. I told her it belonged to her great-grandfather, and that he used to say a job wasn't finished until it was written down. She nodded like that made perfect sense to an 8-year-old, and maybe it did. I started something small at the library near our apartment, a Saturday morning class for anyone in the neighborhood who wanted to learn basic bookkeeping, the kind of record keeping that had saved me when I needed it most. We named it after my father, the Delgado Ledger Project. 6 people showed up the first week, 20 by the 3rd month. Morgan and I still work together. I won't pretend I know exactly what to call what's between us now, whether it's friendship or the beginning of something slower and more careful. What I know is that she stopped by the library one Saturday and sat in the back of the class, not saying anything, just listening the way she'd learned to since the cafe. I think about that day sometimes, the slap, the silence after it, the way Magnus looked at my wrist like it was a door opening onto something I'd forgotten about myself. I don't hold it against her anymore. People do their worst on their worst days. What matters is what they do the day after that. My father used to say a job wasn't finished until it was written down. I understand that better now than I ever did while he was alive. Because the truth always leaves a paper trail, if you're patient enough to write it down and honest enough to read it back. I keep that ledger with me still. Not because I need it for work. Because he was right. Have you ever had someone misjudge you completely before they knew the first thing about your story? Tell me about it below. I read every comment.